First of all, I'm Elena Rokou. I am the Chief Research Director of Creative Decisions, but most of all, I've been really lucky to be one of the students of Thomas Saaty. And I have been working a long time with Rosanne Saaty and Tom and learning about these methods. And I'll try to take you with me through a trip going from why to use this kind of methods to how, until we proudly present on Monday our own solutions developed with this method. First of all, something pretty simple. How's the weather today? Are you feeling cold? Warm? Over here in Pittsburgh, that's from where I'm talking to you today, the temperature is 59 Fahrenheit. For me, when I first got here from Greece, that was super cold. I really thought that I was freezing cold. It was freezing cold. Well, that's not true. For most of us nowadays in Pittsburgh, this is just an average cool day, not even cold. So why am I saying that? Because numbers can be deceptive, sometimes at least. We want our decisions to incorporate the numbers, but as our own perception of the value of the numbers to us. So we don't just want numbers, we want also the meaning that is associated with the numbers. We want to be able to use our experience and knowledge and we want to include in our decisions our gut feeling while being precise in using the measurements. What is AHP and ANP? This is a family of methods that allow us to make decisions combining tangible and intangible decision factors. You can reduce complex decisions to a series of one-to-one comparisons that are easier to tackle. This way, the decision makers can end up with the best decision for the problem at hand, taking always into consideration who is deciding and what is their perspective. On top of that, you have a clear rationale about how you ended up with this decision. And if somebody asks you, why did you decide like that? Say, hey, wait a second, I can tell you why. Here are my calculations. Here is the weight of the criteria that I decided. And that's why we ended up with this decision. So it's really good also for helping you being accountable for the decisions that you make. How can you use this group of methods? To select the best alternative, predict likely outcomes, facilitate group decision making, allocate resources optimally, select risk control, of course, do benefit, opportunities, cost and risk analysis. That's similar to the SWOT analysis, and that's probably something that you will end up doing for the case studies that we will be solving during this competition. And of course, you can do portfolio management, optimal resource allocation, and and a bunch of other types of problems. Is this method used? Do we have actual practical cases? Yes, definitely yes. It has been used all over the world, from Lanzhou University and the People's Bank of China to the Defense Health Agency and the Texas Department of Transportation, to the Federal Aviation and Administration over here in US, to UNOS, the National Organ Allocation from the American health system. What kind of projects? Well, I'll tell you something. I teach at the University of Pittsburgh at the business school, and the students every year find problems to solve using these methods and try to apply to things that they know and they are part of their business setup. For example, a few years ago, I don't know if you remember, around fall 2020, because of the COVID pandemic, there were a lot of issues on how the universities should work. Our Pitt students decided to undertake a really big problem, how to deliver the undergraduate classes. And they were pretty good. They provided a solution that the university ended up following. Around, around that time, we were discussing what Amazon Prime should do about their problem with the customer satisfaction level. Because as you remember, at the beginning of the pandemic, there were a lot of issues related with deliveries of product, on-time deliveries. Amazon Prime users are expected to receive their products within 1 to 2 days from their ordering time. However, that was not possible, especially at the beginning of the pandemic. And Amazon as a company was wondering whether they should do something in order to improve the satisfaction levels, or just leave it as it is because it wasn't up to them and it wasn't their fault that they weren't able to deliver on time. They ended up deciding that they shouldn't do anything. A lot of outsourcing or buying or outsourcing decision or supplier selection decisions come to play when we use the AHP A&P method. Or also, how would you handle the situation of a buyout from a company to another company? But we'll see more examples later on in our process. In AHP, we are talking about a decision-making process that involves setting priorities, our own personal priorities with our consciously elicited subconscious pairwise comparison. What do I mean? Well, yes, you do enter your own judgments, but these judgments, based on the process that you have to follow, are judgments that are going to help you. Yes? What do we mean? We mean that within the process that we will be following in AHP and ANP, you will be able to learn more about the problem that you're solving. You will analyze aspects that you weren't thinking of at the beginning, and that will give you the possibility to see the problem and the solution from another perspective, from a lot of different perspectives. Analyze and synthesize the solutions. So the AHP is the way to derive priorities by asking at each point of time the right questions and trying to analyze the answers that you are getting. How do we understand and define the problem as completely as you can? That's actually the first step for any decision-making problem. You want to be able to see the problem from different perspectives all around it and try to define the factors that play into this as clearly and concise as you can. You want to structure then the problem, if we are talking about AHP, as a hierarchy, but we'll see the differences later on. Then, either if you are the person that is making the decision maker, you are going to elicit the judgments that reflect those ideas, feelings, and emotions. Or if you are not the decision maker, you will set up the process in order to collect the judgments and later on make the calculations needed to find the results. So besides collecting the judgments, we need to make sure that these judgments represent the truth and it's meaningful and at an acceptable level of consistency. And keep in mind what I'm saying about consistency. We are going to work a little bit more on that concept in a few minutes. So what do we have so far? You understand and define the problem. You structure the problem as a hierarchy or a network, I'll say. You find a way to collect the judgments that correspond to that. You do your mathematical calculations to get the results, and then you use sensitivity analysis to evaluate whether your model is robust, meaning if I make small changes in the judgments, will I see any difference in the results? I shouldn't, because, some days we wake up and something is 7 times more important than something else, and some other days we are really in a bad mood and something is, 5. You didn't change your mind, but depending on the context and the time, you might not use exactly the same number from time to time when you are entering judgments. And we want to make sure that no matter what, your model will keep giving the correct, right result. Oh, here, look, this is how an AHP model looks like. We have the goal, the criteria, and we have the alternative. What is the goal? Goal is what we are trying to decide for. Criteria, the decision factors. Do I need to put all the decision factors so simply in a line? Is that all? That's pretty simple, right? Well, no, that's not. We make a lot of levels, we define a lot of factors, and we find the ways that they relate. But this is the starting point. We have the goal, we have the criteria, and then the alternatives. The idea is that we will need to prioritize both tangibles and intangibles. We want to try to quantify the judgments and make a way to show what are the best solutions for that problem. Why did we end up with methods like this one? Classical operations research assumed objectivity. And for a long time, we thought that being objective, it might be more important than anything else. However, operations researchers, and that unfortunately includes me too, at the beginning hardly bothered to ask the decision maker about his or her preferences, assuming that a well-defined single objective function was a good enough solution. We are fine. I have a good optimization function. I can solve everything. Well, the problem was that, yes, we can indeed solve most of the problems using optimization. But sometimes the solutions that we are getting are not solutions that you can actually use because they are not very easily applicable or they don't fit the profile of the company. And on top of that, we have the fact that there is not objectively right and wrong decision. There is only a preferred alternative solution. I can't tell you what you are deciding is right or wrong. I can tell you whether, based on your personal perspective, that decision matches your system of beliefs and your priorities as they are represented at this particular point of time. And there are a lot of people, and I think that I agree, I don't know about you, that say that to model a problem and to distinguish between the objective and the subjective components and put them all together and make them work correctly is not just something that you can learn. It's kind of its own form of art because you have to get through the experience and the knowledge, both of the methods and the field, those factors that really matter, and leave alone those factors that bring only noise to your process and they are not helpful to you. And also have the wisdom to accept that some of the factors that you find that very important are not important for everybody. Every time that you set up a model, the model has to represent the decision maker, their perspective and their way of working. Not your personal subjective one, unless the model is for you and you are the decision maker, of course. Let's see. We talked a lot about what is AHP, but we haven't seen any simple example. So we can start kind of testing ourselves with that. Well, the simplest, literally the simplest model that you can ever see about AHP is trying to compare 3 different apples with respect to their size. How do we do that? I'll take you with me. And let's take a look on how we set up a decision-making process of the kind. You should be able to see my screen by now. Excellent. Let's see what we want to do. We said that we have 3 apples, right? Yes, of course. Let's see. Apples A, B, and C. And I'm going to evaluate their size. So I am going to enter judgment with respect to size. What do I mean I'm going to enter judgment? How do I do that? It's actually a lot simpler than it sounds. What we are going to do for each criterion that we are using is that we create a pairwise comparison matrix. A pairwise comparison matrix will be a matrix, a square matrix that has the components that you are evaluating both on the rows and the columns. So here is my initial matrix that will host my judgment. Obviously, because when you compare something to itself, they are equal, whatever the characteristic that you are doing the comparison, the diagonal is always full of ones. See? The main diagonal of the table has always 1. And at 1 really means that A is the same. What characteristic we are evaluating? Size. So the same size to B, to A, to itself. What about the rest? Well, we usually work line by line when we see a pairwise comparison matrix. And what we are trying to do is to answer to the question with respect to the criterion that we were working on. So in this case, the size. Which one is? Sometimes you will hear me saying important or dominant or likely. In this case, I'll simply say which one is larger because we're talking about size. A or B? A or B? B or A? These 2 values are really connected. The weight of A over B and the weight of B over A. If I say A is 2 times larger than B, then I'm going to come and put my value over here. And that means that B is a half of A. In other words, I'm saying that for each item in my table, item IJ, where I is the row and J is the column that I'm reading at that point of time, is 1 over A Ji. See? 2, 1 over 2. How many more times is, so we continue the process for each of them. And the next that we would say would be, how many more times A is larger in this case than C? Maybe I'll say 5. If I say 5, then I mean that C versus A is 1 over 5. And I need one more judgment to complete the process of setting up my judgments. Over here, B versus C. How many times is B larger than C? Let's say that is 2. Then this would give me 1 over 2. Now you will notice with the material that all the material that we are seeing right now, during the break, I'll send you on the messaging, on the chat of Zoom, the link where you can find it. So you can download it and you can also practice by yourself and read again while you refer to the material while you're solving. Back to our table. I have my table, and what did I need to do? I needed to enter 3 different values. What would happen if I wanted to say that B is larger than A? Well, I could enter on this side, let's say that I want to say that B is twice as A. It's not true. It's not correct right now. Let's assume that, you got confused for a second and you were seeing everything upside down. If you wanted to say that B is larger than A, you would put, for example, here the value. B is 4 times larger than A, and then the row would become 1 over 4. And that's it. If you see in your judgments a value that is less than 1, then you know that you are talking about an inverted value. This over here, the 1 over 4 or 0.25, it would be really meaning that B is more important, not A. Every time that I see 1 over something or a value that is less than 1, between 0 and 1, then I know that this is not the dominant criterion. The other one is the dominant. And now let's get back to the original value so we don't mess up the logic of our problem. By the way, you might notice in our slides that we don't have the same values. That's on purpose because people sometimes make slight mistakes or they don't agree exactly on the values. And we want a method that is able to get back from those small mistakes, that it will not penalize you because instead of 3, that was the actual relative size between B and C, you put 2. You want to have a pretty good result, even if you made a mistake here and there. Now, let's see how it goes. What do we do with these values? Well, I calculate the priority vectors with these values. How do I do it? We are going to use later on a tool called Super Decisions. You have already received information about that. But for now, let's see how we do actual calculations by hand. It's pretty simple. I have my table that says 1, 2, 5, a half, 1, 2, 1/5, a half, 1. And the first thing that I do would be to sum the lines. I'll have 8, 3.5, and we'll go on. And then I'll calculate the total. That will be the sum of these 3. And then I'm going to normalize, that's what we call it, by dividing each entry to the total. Let's move to Excel to see these calculations in practice, and then we can come back and continue discussing about our setup. Here we are. And let's bring in our nice little apples so we have a reminder of why we are doing all this. Yep, here are the apples that I'm trying to evaluate. And this is the table that we ended up setting up together. ABC and ABC. What did we say? Once in the main diagonal, our values above the diagonal, I had 2, 5, and 3. Let's make it look nice because it helps us think correctly. Below the diagonal, I'll have the inverted values. So 1/2, 1/5, and again, 1/2. I am going to do my sum of lines. And I'll divide it by the total. And again, sum of the line divided by total. This is my first result. These are the normalized, as we call them, results. Because if you notice, they add up 1. And you can actually pretty easily see how the decision is formed if you use a little pie. See, that's the relative size of our apples. What about when you want to compare and focus on the first one? In that case, we use the idealized view of the values. The idealized view of the values divides its entry by the maximum of the vector. And here we are. This is the way that the idealized values show the situation. It's not a different situation, it's just a different way of display the result. We like the idealized view when we want to compare items, groups of items that have different number of items in them. So if one group has 3 and one group has 5, and we use the normalized priorities, we won't be able to really evaluate, because even if they were equal, the thing that we were dividing in 3 equal parts, it will take a 33% of probability, while the other one will be taking 20%. Here, look there. I have a group that has 3 items, and I have a second group of apples that has 5. If they were equal, each of them will have normalized probability of 1/3, while the other one will have normalized probability of 1/5. They're equally good, they are at the same level, but the optics says something different. It says that D is less good than A, but they are not. They're exactly the same. They are all the same. The problem is that one time, with a normalized, we divided the pie in 3 parts, and the other one time we divided the pie by 5. So when you want to compare the priorities that come from 2 groups that don't have the same number of items, you always choose to pick the idealized result. Are we good? Do we have any questions so far? Excellent.
All clear right now.
All right. Hey, did you notice that I didn't actually put the right value for apple A versus apple C? Here, look at this. The value that I was supposed to put in was 3, but I put the 2. Did I make a mistake there? No. People don't always answer the same thing every time that you ask them. There are inconsistency issues. So when you say that apple A is twice as big as B and A is 6 times as big as C, then it's kind of implied that apple B is 3 times larger than C. However, we don't always use the correct, in quotes, number. Why? Because we make mistakes, because we don't want to go through the process of calculating the values. We actually want to evaluate and enter our judgments. Is that bad? No, actually, we like it as long as it stays at a level that we can handle, that the math that is the basis of this method is able to help us recover from. So small mistakes are okay. A little bit of inconsistency, less than 10%, let's make it a number, less than 10% in most of the cases is acceptable. However, you don't want to go far beyond that, because then we will have the usual problem for decision-making methods that says garbage in, garbage out. If you don't give me good information, I cannot give you a good result. What are these numbers that I was entering? Are those absolute numbers? Actually, they are not. They might look normal numbers as the ones that you usually use, but they are not. They are something slightly different. They are ratios. Why? Because they are used to rate things, to compare. It's not A is a 3, it's A in relation to B twice as big, so it's a 2. That 2 is a ratio. And we have a specific scale that we take our numbers. It's a scale from 1 to 9. Let's start with the obvious question, why not 0? If the relationship between your two factors is 0, then they are not related. So why did you put a relationship over there? If they are not related, do not connect it. Do not make me answer you something that you already know that it doesn't exist. So 0 is not really included in this scale, because we assume that the moment that we are connecting two factors, two objects of our model, there is a clear relationship, even if the relationship is that they are equally important. Our scale goes from 1 to 9, where 1 means equal importance, 9 means extremely more important. Can I use decimals? Yes. Usually, however, you don't go out and say, hey, I think that this apple is 2.3 times larger than that apple. No, the truth is that we have the decimals for another reason. When we combine judgments from a lot of people, we will use some kind of aggregation function, like the average or the geometric mean. By the way, the geometric mean is better. But anyway, we'll use some kind of aggregate function. That function will probably end up giving us some decimals here and there. That's why we have the decimals as possible options there. Does that mean that I'm not allowed to use decimals? No, it just means that most people, most of the times, prefer to use the whole numbers when they are directly asked which one is more important, A or B, and by how much. And having said that about our scale, let's see how do we work. We'll start with a simple problem, and during these 2 days, we'll get to more complex and more complex situation. Today, what we're going to do is that we're going to see a couple of exams in AHP. Then we're going to see how we move from simple AHP to ANP and ratings. While tomorrow in the morning, we are going to focus on how we do a benefits, opportunities, cost, and risks analysis. How does this method work? Yeah, you know, first we start by defining the problem. We identify the possible solutions. You'll hear me call them alternatives. We define the decision factors. And then if we are talking about A&P methods, we will need to group the decision factors. Sometimes we need to do that also in AHP, of course. We'll find the flow of influence. So who is related to who, which factor influences which other factor. And then we pairwise compare factors, or we create a survey and send it out in order to receive the values. We are learning this kind of method because we are going to be the ones setting up the models. The decision makers, most of the decision makers will not have a clear knowledge of the exact details of the model. They are the ones that will give you the judgments, their expert opinion, and their perspective, but they are not responsible for the model. All right, a simple example. What's my decision goal? Find out where to get lunch today. What are the alternatives we wanted to consider? These are three different options for different places that you can have lunch around here in the area that is my office. Let me tell you a little bit about the alternatives so you can follow along and help me decide. Primanti has a lot of different options and items. It's pretty well known for its low prices and their speed. Panera has a little bit more alternative options. They are pretty good quality, not so fast and not so inexpensive as you would expect. Piada is a new place that opened up a couple of blocks from here. It provides, let's say, Italian food, but it's not exactly the kind of pizza and pasta that you would expect, but a specific item that is called piada. So it's more specific, very small menu, even more expensive than the previous two. Pretty good, both from a perspective of quality and speed. What are the important decision factors there? What do you think? Let's try to set it up by ourselves, actually. Give it a second. All right. Let me take you with me in this process of trying to set up our lunch model. And that's how we work with most AHP models. First of all, I am going to define my goal. My goal in this first decision that we're tackling is where to get lunch from. The second thing that I usually do is identify my possible solutions, the alternatives. Why would we do that? Well, by knowing the alternatives, I can identify factors that relate to the specific solutions. And because I don't want to create a model that will be there forever and ever, I want a flexible living model that will be able to evolve and change during the setup. We will have the alternatives first. So I have Panera, Primanti, Panera, and Piada. What are the decision factors? Let's say that you're trying to help me decide what kind of decision factors would you include in this setup? And you can also send your answers through the chat. What kind of decision factors? Price. Yeah, I'm with you. Let's put the price there. Distance. That's a good factor. However, let me help you with that. All these three places are a couple of blocks, pretty much the same distance from my office. So I'm not going to use the distance, not because it's not a good factor, but because it will not help me decide. And while trying to make a very simple and fast to decide model, I don't want to put factors that will give me the same results for all three alternatives. So quality, I like that. Quality it is. What else would you consider? Menu. Yes, that's a good idea. You always want to have something nice to it, right? Now I'll tell you something about me. I'm pretty impatient. That means that I don't like to wait to pick up my order. That's why I would add to these factors also speed and service. You could also, yes, these are really good ideas. You could also put the quality of service. Nobody likes picking up their order and seeing somebody grumpy. Exactly. Or also, what reviews does the place have? However, since we are going for a small and flexible model, I will take out the reviews just because it happens that I know all three places and I have my own previous experience. I would keep it if I didn't know and I was trying to try something new. It's a really good one. And let's try to work from there. We have our decision factors. Now it's time to try to set up our pairwise comparison. That means that having the decision factors, I'm going to set up my very first model where we have our goal. Let's call this criteria that I decided to keep in criterion 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. The goal will be connected to each of my criteria. And then each of the criteria will be connected to my alternatives, 1, 2, and 3. So I would have everything connected with everything. And I know it won't give a very nice looking graph now, but we have to remember that we will be connecting all the criteria to all the alternatives at this point of time. Now that I have this set up, I can actually go and create my Excel spreadsheet that will help me see how the pairwise comparison will be defined. Let's go to that Excel that we had started, and let's start thinking about our AHP lunch model. First thing first, I want to define what happens with respect to the goal. So with respect to the goal, that is deciding about lunch, we are going to set up all the decision factors. So we would have price, as you told me, quality, menu, speed, and quality of service. And I'll set up my table exactly the same way on the other side. My ones. And then I'll have to start evaluating. Now, does it matter the order that I put the criteria in? Although I would be almost ready to tell you no, the truth is that yes, it matters. We usually put something that we know a lot about first. Some researchers also would suggest to put the smallest or the largest, the most important or the least important, exactly for the same reason, to put you in the right framework and facilitate the process. So for example, what do I think that is more important for my decision? Quality or price? I would say that quality is quite a bit more important. And I'm well known because I'm a picky eater, so menu is super important to me. I can't stay without anything. Speed. I think that I kind of introduced myself saying that I'm impatient. So speed is also super important. And yeah, I'm one of those people that really don't like not being talked to nicely. So quality of service goes also pretty high in our list. And since I have the first line, I can also go and do my first column calculation. Now I'm going to follow through with the rest of the judgments. Quality versus menu. Yes, let's see. I think that quality is slightly more important. Speed and quality go almost hand to hand for me, and quality versus quality of service. Okay, I'll give it to quality, but slightly. Menu versus speed. That's a tough one. I would say that they are pretty much the same. Maybe menu is slightly more important. Menu versus quality of service. Let's see there. Menu versus quality of service. Slightly menu, more important. Speed versus quality of service. That's pretty difficult to define. I would say that, okay, after all, speed is quite more important for me. Now I'm going to do the inverse for each of the judgments that I set up. And I'll do the same for the rest of them. And here we have the first full table. Is this a full HP model? No, not at all. We'll have to work quite a bit in order to complete our model. Now, what we're going to do is that we are going to take 5 minutes of a break, and I'll ask you to contact Liron. You see her over here. I'm going to spotlight her too. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go through the steps of the calculations in Excel. They are approximate calculations. They don't give your final results in any way, but they are good estimates that we use when we don't have the time to go through the detailed process of setting it up in a software tool or in a programming language like Python. So one by one, the criteria. I did my with respect to the goal. Now I'll go one by one the criteria, and I'll start working with them. With respect to quality, you see over here what are my evaluations about Primanti, Panera, and Piada. And I have also price, which I want to show you before we go to the rest of them. For price, I went through a process where I went to the website of each of the three places and I found a common object. In my case, I found that all three of them sell Caesar salads with chicken. And I have over here the prices that I found out that they sell this item. And it was 9, 11, and 13. Let's wait. First of all, let's calculate the priorities for each of our items. The calculation that I'm doing now, see, this is the sum of the row. And this is the total. Come on, the next cell, please. Thank you. And now I can have my normalized results, which will be the sum of each row over the total. I'm going to anchor this cell so we don't change the total every time. Here we are. And you will notice today that I like formatting my results. So I'm going to add on top of that a color scale so I can see what's happening. And obviously, it seems that price is the most important criterion over here, followed by quality, menu, speed, and quality of service. That they are, the yellow ones are pretty much on the same level. Let's see what happens when we do the same application with Primanti. With respect to quality, which one is better? And see over here, I'm going to do my calculations, my approximate calculations again. And here we have very quickly the priorities with respect to quality. But these are just numbers. What does it really mean? It means that with respect to quality, I believe that Piada is the best one, while Panera follows very closely by, and the last one is Primantis. What about price? In price, I have actual numbers. I don't want to go through the process of evaluating the prices. I could, based on the logic that, you know what, it depends. Yes, Marcel?
Yes, hello. May I have a question? Because I think there should be under 1 in place C5, because in the quality there is
C5.
It's
C5.
one above.
Yes. Thank you so much. That's really good. Let's check the other two now, because see, you made me think about it again. Speed, yeah.
I mean, when there's a quality and quality, there's a blank space. And it changes the result. Oh, here, yeah.
Thank you. Really good catch. Let's see. Price still, unfortunately, is up there. It was my favorite result, but anyway. But now at least we have quality a little bit further ahead. Thank you. Let's see what we have over here. We have the results for quality, and we are thinking about price. Can I do the same process like I did with quality? Yes, by all means. And it makes sense in some situations. For example, the amount of money that I would spend, or how expensive it looked to me to go out with my friends for a pizza at my first year of college versus now, it's completely different. For me, it was an outing going out for a pizza. Right now, it's a little bit more on the fast food term that, okay, let's do it quickly and easily. So although the prices didn't change that much, my perspective of the price changed. And that happens with everybody. If something is within your budget or very easily approachable, then it's perceived as less expensive than the same quality, the same number later on. But I want you to see also the ability that we have to enter actual numbers and evaluate the situation based on those numbers. So when I have numbers and I want to use the numbers instead of my perception of the numbers, well, if I did the usual thing that I did so far, which is to add up the values and divide by the sum, and let me lock the cells over here. Let's make sure that we have the right references. It seems that Picada is the best option with respect to price. That doesn't seem right. It's the most expensive one. I don't want the most expensive one as the best option with respect to price. How do I work? I will invert the values before adding them up. So instead of saying 9, I will say 1/9. And I'll do the same for all the prices that I have. There we go. And we have exactly the opposite and much more normal result, meaning that right now we have I just noticed your comments. Give me a second to see what we had. Menu versus quality, quality versus menu. Menu versus quality, quality versus menu. This should be there. Menu. How did it come there? Menu versus price, price versus menu. I think that some of the calculations didn't go there. Speed, 1/speed, 1/quality of service. Still the same, but I wanted to make sure. All right. The same process that we did with quality, we will need to do it with all of our sets. Now allow me to take out this because I'm going to use the table for all of them. You will see in just a second why I'm taking out the references. So we can use it for all the criteria and we don't need to repeat the process a lot of times. We have price, we have quality. We have menu, speed, and quality of service. We have menu, speed, and quality of service. Now I'm going to remove the values. And that's probably the easiest way that you can handle it. And let's see what we have. With respect to menu. Now, menu is a little bit more complicated. Why? Because there are a lot of different ways that you can evaluate the menu. For example, I could focus on the variety. Or in this case, because we're talking about the decision that I'm going to make, I am going to focus on whether I like or not the items. And I can tell you that I like a lot more the items in the menu that Panera has. And a little bit more the items that Piada has. And Panera versus Piada, I definitely prefer Panera. I keep an eye to see if the priorities that I'm getting are making sense to me. Yes, Panera is my favorite of the three, and my second favorite is Piada with respect to the menu, and list of them, Primanti. So I'm good, and I can go to my next calculations. With respect to speed, Primanti is actually the fastest to bring the food, so we'll go for a 3. Well, let's be honest, maybe even a 4. Primanti versus Piada, still faster, but not too that much. Panera versus Piada, actually Piada is slightly faster. Let's see, it appears that Primanti is the fastest, followed by Piada, and last one, Panera. Yeah, because Panera is actually slight. Is it? No, I think that I agree with myself. You trust me. You put your own values, obviously. Primanti versus, well, here you are. Primanti versus Panera, which one has better quality of service? Pretty awful, both of them. Primanti versus Piada. Piada has much better quality of service. Panera versus Piada. Piada still has better quality of service. And yes, Piada has the best quality of service among the three, followed by Panera, and last one ends up being Primanti. Now, if I didn't have any tools, or libraries to use in order to make calculations, then I would accept these approximations and I would combine them. How would I combine them? I would take the vector that comes from the criteria over here. See? I am going to paste it as values. Nicely and neatly. Here are my values. Here are my criteria. And we are good. Now I'm going to try for each of my alternatives to go and put the corresponding vector over here. So I would have for price, this one, for quality, for menu, speed, and quality of service. Now you see me really often formatting my results. It's not because I cannot survive if I don't see them formatted. It's more like the more information that I can visualize, the more I know whether I'm doing it right or not. And I can go and check, because if I don't understand why I'm getting a result, probably I enter a judgment somewhere in the wrong way, and it's not representing my actual true opinions on the subject. Now we are going to multiply by the vector in order to get our final results. Second to do the calculation, and we should be good to go. And here are our results. Not very far ahead, any of them, which I kind of expected, because you see, Primanti is very good at price and speed. Panera is exceptional with respect to their menu, while Piada has the quality and quality of service. So in the end of the day, it's kind of balanced out. There are trade-offs all over the place. However, now that I see this, I can also tell you what would happen for the different values of my criteria. So I could also do a sensitivity analysis based on these results. How? Let's take, for example, price. Right now, you have the value when price is 0.47. But let's see how different values of the price would affect my results. I'm going to actually recalculate my results using this time, this vector over here. See? This will be the vector that I will be using for my sensitivity analysis. Let's here. Of course, I cannot leave the rest. If you sum them up right now, you will notice they are not adding up to 1 anymore. So I will need to multiply each of them to the difference. And that will change pretty much all the results that we have, because we have to proportionally change the values.
Excuse me, have you turned off the screen sharing?
Oh, thank you. Let me reshare. Here we are. You should be able to see again, I hope.
Yes, thank you.
So every time we will be multiplying the current value times the difference of AH4 minus I4. That's very fun. And here we'll do it one more time. And we will see the way that our values, these values, change over time. Now, this is how we do the calculations manually. However, what we want to do is to be able also to use our software tool so we can do faster and more complex calculations. Don't forget that anyway, what we did so far is an approximation, but it's really useful in order to be able to understand how and why the method actually works. So what I'm going to do now is that I'm going, give me a second to pull up the super decision tool, and I'm going to do exactly the same things, but this time using the software so we can see how that will affect my results. Just a second while it's loading. And let's share this time. Here we are. It took us a second, but we are there. I'm going to start by sharing my file. So I'm creating a new file. This is Super Decision. This is a tool that we use in order to create models, handle the calculations, and insert also the judgments. So I'm going to recreate the model that we were discussing, the simple one, so we can see. Whenever we want to start, we start by creating clusters. Clusters are grouping units for our components. There are two ways to create a cluster. Either you add a new cluster by clicking at the top right corner, and I'll set up my 3 clusters. I'll have one for my goal. You always have a goal if you have an AHP model. You don't need a goal. You shouldn't have a goal if you have an ANP model. And then we have our decision factors or criteria. And we have also our alternative. I move them around. Sometimes they fell one on the other, and that's not very useful for us. So we'll move them around in such a way that we can see everything and have an overview. For my goal, I'll say this is 1, goal node. And if I'm in a good mood, I might even share some details with the rest of the people. Choose lunch spot. Decision factors, we decided for price, quality, what else did we have in our Excel spreadsheet? Price, quality. I'm trying to use the same order. That's why I'm going to pick for a second on my Excel. Menu. Speed. And quality of service. Here we have everything that we just created. And now I'm going to find my alternatives, select them. I see the border that is darker gray. And here I'm going to add my alternatives, which would be Panera, and Piada. I know I have twice the same, but I wanted to keep the same order, so I'm going to have to go and rename it. When I want to rename, I'll just click on the edit button. This should have been Primanti. Sooner or later it will be. And we're there. Now I have the bare-bone structure there, but I need to also identify how the flow of influence goes. In other words, I want the connection. I'll select this button over here, enable it, it's blue, left click to define the source of a connection, right click to define a destination. In an AHP model, I will always connect my goal to my criteria, and each criterion either to its own sub-criteria, because you can break it down, or if it doesn't have sub-criteria, then I should be connecting to the alternative. So let's see what connections did I make. Goal node to all the criteria, each criterion to all the alternatives. Now I'm ready to enter the judgment. Now, with this kind of tools, always remember to have multiple versions and saving very often. Another way to enter or overview the connections is if you use the eye, you can reopen the left-hand side panel, go to the section that says Make Show Connections, and display the connections. For example, from goal node, what connections do we have? These are the connections that I identified. The goal node is connected to all my criteria. That's good. I don't need anything else. For each of the criteria, I want to make sure that I have all my alternatives. That's good too. That means that now I can go to the next step. That was to enter the judgments like I did before in my Excel. I can either use the graphical questionnaire, or if I like the matrices, I can use the matrix. Notice that I will be seeing the top upper triangular, the upper triangular. So if we are over here, I have next to me the Excel spreadsheet that we were entering values before. So I'm going to just enter the same values so we can see how it would look. 3, 5, 4, and 5. 2, 1, 2. I'm not thinking just because I already have the values over there. 2, 2, 3, I believe. Now, if you bring next one to the other, you will notice that we are not getting the same results. Did we do something wrong on the Excel spreadsheet? No, it's just that what we did in Excel, it's one iteration from quite a few that we would need to get the final results. On the right-hand side, you can see the resulting values, and you can even copy them and take them with you to an Excel spreadsheet to use them. More importantly, over here, you see also something that is called inconsistency. If the inconsistency value is above 10%, you will need to click the inconsistency button, inconsistency report, and find out where did you kind of lost your train of thought and you put something that it shouldn't be there. For example, menu over speed. Based on the rest of the values that we have, it seems that we said that menu is twice more important than speed, but they expected us to say that speed is 1.5 times. And while I don't really agree with this statement, and I will not change completely my evaluation, maybe I would say that this was not a 2, it was a 1.5 instead. See, somewhere around here is when we start using decimals because we're trying to fix a situation. And yeah, I lowered my inconsistency a little bit more. Remember, the goal is to keep it under 10%. It's not to make it 0. Zero inconsistency it doesn't give a better model with a mod compared to a model that has a 3% of inconsistency. It might be better and it might not be, but the decision won't be made based on the inconsistency. Price. For price, I want to do what I did also on my Excel. So I'm going to give you the values that I want, which was 9, 11, and 13. And based on these values, I'm going to say, hey, this is price. The best value is the one that has the lowest number. So please invert my results. For the next one, which is quality, I will go and use again my same numbers. So I would have I can say, for example, here, because I have a point 33, at the moment that I will do it, look, the system will recognize immediately that I really meant the opposite, and I'll make it even better, and I'll say, yep, I meant the opposite. Panera is more important than Primanti. Panera has better quality. And then I would have Piada, that is a 0.2. And yes, because it's a value less than 1, you will see it changing color, changing direction, and showing you the new value. And for the third value, we had 2. And we are good. Menu. 0.25. 0.5. The next one, we will do it with the questionnaire, so you can see it that way too. And 3. And our results are pretty similar, so we are still doing good. And for speed we have had 4 and 3, because Primanti is actually faster. And 0.5, because Panera is definitely not faster. Notice that I'm saving again and again, just to make sure that there won't be any losses of information. And then I have 1.25, 0.25. And we should be done. I'm going to do computations and weighted supermatrix graphical. This is the way that we combine all of these values, like the previous table that we did in Excel. And I see my vector that has to do with the criteria, and I see the small vectors that are related to the alternatives with respect to each of the criteria. At this point, I know that I have entered all my judgments, and I can go and synthesize to get my result. Obviously, the result is very close to what we saw before. So Panera slightly better, followed very closely by Primanti, and just a little bit further behind is Piada. And that's how we set up the first AHP problem in SuperDecision. Now I would like to do, and it's a little bit easier over here, the sensitivity. I'll do edit independent variable, edit again, and I'm going to be changing the supermatrix with respect to the goal node.
Sorry, Elena. Sorry to interrupt. Oh, we can't see the sensitivity window.
Thank you.
Edit.
I think that I have a fix. Let's give it a try. What about now?
Yeah, they can see the whole screen.
Excellent. So we have the price, and this is our sensitivity over here. I will be working with the super matrix, that is that big matrix that I show you. I want to see how the results, so whatever is around the goal node, is affected by changes that I will be making to price. Done. And update. Hey, how do we read this? First of all, I really care about the cross points. And more than that, I care whether they change the order of the solutions, the ranking of the solutions. Let's see over here. Here we go. There is a cross point. Is that important? Well, in order to identify whether that's an important change or not, I'll need to pull up the computation's priorities and keep them close to me, because they will show me what's the actual value of this criteria. We were talking about price, and right now the priority of price is 0.49. I'm getting a rank reversal between the first and second position if the priority goes above 62%. We are talking about a 10% change in the value. That's not exactly a small change. So my model is quite robust with respect to price. Small changes in the values that I enter in the judgment should not affect the final result. However, average size changes, because we are talking about going from 49% to 62%, will eventually affect my final results. Not too bad, but not too happy too. I'll check the second cross point. It's not that important because it shows a reverse between the position of the first and the third choice, so between Primanti and Piada, that are the last two. But I see that if the priority of price goes under 37-ish%, then the second best option will become my Piada, and the third best option will be Primanti. So the only reason that it's up there is because the priority of price is pretty high. If we lower the priority of price, if we don't care about price anymore that much, then obviously you can see that the second best option will become Piada. And let's see how the other criteria affect our results. Quality. Okay. If quality is above 11%, current value of quality 16%. Again, small changes will not affect my results. A little bit larger changes might affect my results. And over here, the same idea. A little bit larger changes might affect my results. So not very important, not very sensible to changes, but somewhat sensible. And we have blue and red. That means that while the priority for this criterion is less than 12%, we will have that the best option is Primanti, while if it increases, we will go the other way around, and the best option will become Panera. Currently, quality is 16%. So the better quality you're requesting, the more you would like to go to Panera. That's what it says, this sensitivity. And here we have something more about our speed. Priority of speed currently 14%. If the priority of speed became less than 7%, then the best option will be Primantis. But it's above 7%, and we have the opposite. Panera has a better opinion. People have a better opinion about Panera with respect to speed. And the last one of our sensitivity analysis will be the quality of service. Here we are, current value of quality of service. Over here, 0.7, very low, somewhere here. Actual value, here. That means that if we have a slight increase of the priority of quality of service from 0.07 to 14%, okay, not so small, but still something that might happen, we will see that the best option will become Piada and the second best option will be Panera. So if the quality of service is really, really important, Piada is a better option than Panera. And Primanti will be at the third spot. And that concludes the first full model, even if it's a small personal decision of AHP that we did. Now, what we are going to do is, first of all, I'll remind you what to try to note down and take into consideration from the case study. We'll take a break for almost half an hour so you can get some coffee or whatever is your preference to wake up and be back nice and focused. We are going to come back with the presentations of the case studies. You would like to start thinking in terms of AHP and decision making. That means that you would like to try and find out what kind of problems you could identify from what you hear and what kind of solutions you could work out for these specific problems. Does that mean that it's not about exactly the case study? It's not a locked case that you are trying to solve. It's not an exercise.